going to go into more detail and called the Prasna Upanishad, which is a video, and you can see that this is my copy, one of my copies. I have several copies. And
I also have mine.
you have yours? Prove it. Oh yeah, there you go. It's like the Bible now. It's in every cabinet in every hotel across Canada. Wouldn't that be funny to go? Did you know that we do that in North America? I don't know if they do that in England, but do you know that we do that in North America, Shreya?
No, I don't know.
So in every hotel room, there's like usually a cabinet, a small little drawer, and inside the drawer there's a Holy Bible in every cabinet. I think it's like, I don't know why we do that, but it's always it's always been happening. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the last hotel I was in had one. So yeah, we'll just take out the Holy Bible and put in the the Upanishads and have everybody take the red pill or the blue pill. I can't remember. Did you ever see The Matrix?
No.
Okay, it's just a movie. It's just a movie from. Okay, I'm getting off track. So we're gonna start our first episode today, which is episode 1, which is about the Prasna Upanishads. And I would love if Shreya, you kind of gave a brief overview of what the book is, and then we can go into we can start, I guess, talking about it.
Sure. So, Prashna Upanishad, it is one of the Upanishads that lie under the category of Atharva Ved. There are 4 Veds that are there: Rig Ved, Yajur Ved, Sam Ved, and Atharva Ved. The Atharva Ved has different Upanishads like Mandukya, Mundak Upanishad, Prashna Upanishad. So, Prashna Upanishad is one of those that belongs to this category. Then, when it comes to Upanishad, let's first understand what the Upanishad means. Upanishad in itself means that we are trying to destroy the roots of ignorance, the roots of worldly existence. So Upanishad can be broken down into 3 parts. Up means to go near to something. Ni means with certainty, with surety, with assurance. Then Shad, that means to destroy the roots of worldly existence. As we all are aware that we keep taking birth, we keep dying. Death is the law of this land, or we can say the law of this universe. Whosoever is born dies, whether it's any creature, it dies. So when we are talking about death, we do know that when there is life, death is bound to happen. Now, this entire vicious cycle of birth and death keeps repeating itself. And since it keeps repeating itself, we require a permanent solution to it. That what can be done, on what path should we be walking upon, so that we can free ourselves from this cycle of birth and death. This transmigratory states which keep on repeating in different forms. The death comes, the life comes, again we are reborn, and this keeps on turning on and off. So, how to get ourselves away from it, how to free ourselves away from it? So, Upanishad is one of those things that leads to the absolute cessation of the transmigratory states. And in further detail, I would say that consider that there is darkness inside a particular hall, and someone gets into the hall and he or she finds that there is a rope that is hanging over at some place, but it appears to be a rope. When one goes closer to it, he or she finds that it was something else. It was just a shadow of the tree or a branch of the tree that was hanging from the window. So that shadow which appeared in the form of a rope or something that is superimposed in nature, everyone's identity, whom we consider as an individual, for example, be it Mitch, be it Shreya, we as an individual can be considered as that rope, which is a superimposition. But once the thing on which this superimposition occurs is exposed, we come to know that this superimposed entity is not the reality. And that is what Upanishad is in essence. That is, it describes that how to get away from this ignorance, from this Maya, from this superimposed entity. Let's understand the entity on which this superimposition is occurring. So, Prashna Upanishad, when we talk about Prashna Upanishad, is one of the most important Upanishads, I would say, because it describes the philosophy of life, death in a very scientific way. And that is why Prashna Upanishad is being taken up on SOS for the first time in itself. And furthermore, the Prashna Upanishad has one thing important, that is, it describes the culture of the spiritual master and the disciples. How the disciples are trying to approach their spiritual master, Pipalada. And Pipalada is the name of the sage or the rishi who is going to give response or answer all the doubts of the disciples that are there with their doubts. So, Prashna Upanishad is in a sense based upon the questions. The word Prashna means questions. So, the disciples are going to ask certain questions which are of huge importance to all of us, which we keep thinking day in and day out, but we are not able to get answers to these because these answers are not present in those disciplines of life which we keep reading every now and then, which I would call the aparavidya, that is in physics and chemistry. We are not going to get those answers. So Upanishad gives answer to all those questions. So this is what I would like to introduce the Upanishads.
Thank you, Shreya. That's so cool. That's like the fifth time I've heard you describe it, and it just gets more interesting every time, which is great, right? That's the that's always a testament to things, though. Is like when you're rewarded for repeat experience, when repetition doesn't become boring, it becomes actually more meaningful or inspiring or something. Then I think that's like true art or some kind of true. Maybe that's just truth. It's just like we're iterating it over and over again, but every time we iterate it, it's more and more meaningful or more impactful, and that's what draws us to not, I guess, binge watching Netflix, which is complete waste. But I'm going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that, Mitch. So the prashna means question, and so I have some, and I gave you heads up with them because that's the kind thing to do. One of the questions that I've had for a little while now, it's been bugging me for a long time, but it's only become like clearer now. It's specifically about evolution. And one of the things that I personally have dealt with, and I use as sort of a close to, if not the bedrock of my logic, my personal logic of understanding the world, is something I call growth. Like, am I growing personally? Am I growing as a human being? And then you can unpack that, which we don't have to right now because it is idiosyncratic, but the general theme is, is the quality of your life improving in such a way that, because the alternative is you binge watch Netflix. You binge watch Netflix because you don't have a life to live. You're actively seeking engagement with something that doesn't exist to fulfill a void. But that's intrinsically wrong. That's backwards. So like, but I'm not judging. I'm trying not to make it sound like a judgment. I'm just thinking out loud. Remember, that's what I said in my description for myself. So with regards to evolution, I've always said, like, as long as my life is growing, or I feel like I'm growing as a person, then I must be on the right path. And now I'm confronting, well, I love challenging myself, and I love asking questions, and I want to know your opinion, Shreya, on evolution itself, because Prashna Upanishads does touch on evolution. You wanted to talk about, and when we mean evolution, I just so that we're on the same page, we mean Darwinian biological evolution, like how things become other things over time. And as if you agree with that sort of definition of what evolution is evolution in fact true, or could we critically evaluate it in such a way? Because for a long time, it's just been something you take for granted. So what do you think about, what's your opinion on, how would you define evolution, and what's your opinion on it as a theory?
So, if we go into the scientific realm of the evolution theory, we know that Darwin has done a lot of work. We are already aware that there was a race that was found 2 lakh years ago, and in Africa, from where we evolved into Homo sapiens of what we are today. And how from prokaryotic beings we emerged as the eukaryotic ones, from unicellular to multicellular. It has been a great journey of evolution. But this evolution in itself is finite in nature. as you mentioned, Mitch, that we have to look into certain aspects, that are we growing in and out or not? Are we growing as a human being? Are we growing in terms of our behavioral aspects? Are we growing in terms of our knowledge? But all these aspects that relate to this particular world, this universe, are finite in nature, isn't it? That we are trying to relate ourselves to the finite aspect of evolution. But the most important, or the core or the gist of evolution, lies that how are we evolved from something that is infinite. If we do believe in something supernatural, be it not any supernatural being like God, let it be any supernatural power. If any one of us do believe in that supernatural aspect of power, we need to look into one thing, that are we as supernatural beings connected to him in some or the other form? And if we are evolving out of that supernatural power, how did that evolution occur? So, though Charles Darwin, all the scientists that have worked upon the finite aspects of evolution, but the infinite aspect of evolution, how that prana has been fused into our body, how
Mhm.
that vital force that is important to live has been fused into the matter of our body, is being told by Upanishad. So that's, that's the scientific difference
Mm.
between how the world deals with evolution and how Upanishad deals with evolution, I think.
Okay, yeah, I was hoping that you would get there. So there are like two, we're talking about two different kinds of evolution now. We're talking about the infinite evolution and the finite evolution. And if I may try to describe both as different things, if you've got the finite evolution, that's like, your child is born, and over a series of like, it seems consistent, like around 9 months, like according
Yes,
to the Roman calendar, we have a baby,
exactly.
which then grows. But as it grows, it also, over the lifespan, will then succumb to deterioration, which is the opposite of growth, on a very superficial level, ultimately until the physical manifestation is no longer mobile. It's just inert. It just becomes there like a stone. Versus the infinite evolution, which is what you mentioned, of a specific word. And Shreya is going to throw Sanskrit at us until we can't see out of our eyes because there's so much sand in our eyes, right? Which is, I love sand, but getting sand in your eyes, oh my God, it hurts so much, right? So we want to always make sure that we're slowing down and unpacking these words. You use the word pran, um, which I'm not going to define, but you can. But the infinite evolutionary process has to do with something closer to the immaterial, the motivating energy, the pran, the vital life force that, even when we talk about what does a dog and a bird and a chimpanzee have in common, like they're acting in the world, and that's different than a stone and the water. So there's this difference, but that without the stones and the waters, you can't have the more complex stuff. And everything seems to be built on this infinite or immaterial or non-physical evolution, which is what the Upanishads talk about, or what the Sanatan culture has been trying to expound for a long time, versus what scientism, if I may call it that, now clings to as evolution, according to Darwin, which is a different kind of evolution. So if you don't mind explaining what pran means, and then what and then continue my, or to spin off of what I said about the how it branches off. What are the two different kinds of evolutions?
Okay. So, pran is something that everyone holds in common, as you mentioned, Mitch, be it a chimpanzee, be it a bird, be it any creature, all have pran in them. And that's the vital force that is necessary for us to sustain life. And when it comes to pran, we need to understand it beautifully in certain aspects. That when I'm talking to someone, when I'm walking, when I'm doing certain things, when I'm thinking, in every action that a human does, whether it is breathing, that is involuntary or voluntary in nature, pran is present. It is the root of everything. So we can say that all these things that are happening are a type of animative effects that are being portrayed through this force, and that force is pran. And that is why the people who are able to train this force, or who are able to give a gush to this force, they can actually perform quite well in their lives. They will not be affected by the different kind of bad, or you can say unworthy situations that occur in their life. They will not be disturbed at all, because they actually know that how they can maintain a balance in the energy which is actually present in their body. So that is why pran is the most important aspect on which we all should be working, so that we are able to live a stable life that can be physically stable as well as mentally stable. And as we have priorly talked about, Mitch, that a disturbance in pran can also prove that there are certain health ailments that will come naturally to that person if there is a disturbance in pran. It can be in the form of the disturbances in spinal cord. That is, it can cause a huge pain in the spinal cord, or it might lead to some disturbance in the kind of like thought-based disturbances. It can also occur in the form of the way you talk, you can stammer, and different things that can happen. So there are huge, a wide range of impacts that are possible if there is a disturbance in this prana. That's the vital force. So that is why it's the most important thing to be worked upon. Other thing that you talked about and you have to ask is that finite and infinite, how these evolutions are different. When we are talking about finite evolution, we keep talking about the biological uh, underlying principle, or the biological underpinning that is there. But in case of the infinite evolution, when we are talking, we all know, I don't know that how much we have read or how much we are aware of this principle, that all of us are made up of the same infinite being. But we are just the different manifestations of the same infinite being. And that is what Swami Vivekananda used to say, that the apparent man is just the limitation of the infinite man, isn't it?
Hmm.
So we are like limiting adjuncts that are trying to get bound to what they are placed into, that is our body. But ultimate reality or the core is that we are infinite in nature. And that is what we are not able to get in sync with. And we start to feel that somehow or some other ways, we are not infinite at all. Since we all talk about finite evolution, we all try to get into the roots from where did we evolve, what was the race earlier, what was the cranial capacity of so and so races. That is all about the scientific facts that are associated to it. But ultimately, all the capacities are born from somewhere. The capacity is inherent, but this capacity evolved due to certain forces. And this infinite kept manifesting itself in different forms, be it in the form of Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, or be it any other form.
Hmm.
So that is the difference between the core difference between the infinite and the finite evolution, I suppose.
Hmm. Very interesting. Limiting adjuncts. That's I'm not gonna say, hey man, what's up anymore. I'm gonna be like, hey, limited adjunct, what's up? I'm just gonna call everybody limited adjunct because that's so funny. And I cannot, I don't think we could have contrived a more neutral, you know, this is the solution to racism. Just call everybody limited adjuncts, you know, because like they're all the
True.
same. We're all the same. We're all limited adjuncts. But now, okay, just to like take us to, have you ever heard the phrase devil's advocate?
The race that was there in Africa.
No, the phrase.
What?
No, the
Tell me
phrase.
what?
The phrase.
Start over the race in Africa.
The
Yeah,
race of
the
devils
phrase.
that live in. Hmm?
No, I haven't heard that, Mitch.
That's funny. That's funny. The race that lives in Africa. They're the devil's advocate for sure. Those bastards. No, the phrase is devil's advocate. Have you ever heard of that phrase?
No.
It's I'm pretty sure it's Christian. But it could be Jewish too. But like they don't say Satan's advocates. They say the devil. But I don't. So, anyways, the devil's advocate is a thing we say in English in the West, which means like I'm gonna ask you a question not because I believe in it, but because I'm curious and it might bother you. So just be ready. It's kind of one of those prefatory statements that we say when we say it's like to make a long story short, actually makes the story longer, which is funny. But so this my devil's advocate question is with regards to like, are we not on dangerously speculative grounds like right now with the sense of the infinite? Because science is the reason why science has brought so much technological advancement and mitigation of suffering if used properly, like the ability for us to do this right now. You could sit in India and I could sit in Canada. We could pretend that we're talking to one another. But now that we have the technology, we are actually talking to one another, as far as I know. Even that could be unpacked, but I'm not going to go there yet. So when you think about the fact that science has proven itself efficacious in the physical world over and over again, it's definitely fallible, and the scientists, the honest ones, know that, and they don't work for big pharma. But the honest scientists, they know that. So when we say things like the infinite, how do you even like what it's almost like, what's the point? Like, you can't prove it, so why are we talking about it? Why are we talking about real world issues that can be reverse engineered and then rigorously examined and then reprogrammed so that they don't happen again? Like, why can't we just do that? What's the point of doing the spirituality stuff if it's ironically limited by the fact that it's infinite and it's incomprehensible?
Okay. It's not at all incomprehensible, Mitch. It requires a lot of practice. Actually, religion or spirituality, in fact, in depth, I would say Sanatan culture. The Sanatan culture talks of spirituality, which is termed as Adhyatma in Hindi. Then, when we are talking about spirituality, we have to understand one thing, that the knowledge of spirituality occurs after practice. Once someone starts to practice, it is only after that the knowledge comes naturally. And in science, there is just the opposite. We first have to establish certain knowledge principles, then we conduct some experiment, and then we get to the results. That's the basic difference. Something which science is unable to prove is not something that is wrong. How can I say that? I have a point to it. For example, let's consider that when we are talking about science, whenever Mitch brings up science into the picture, I would feel like telling everything that I have to. Okay. So when we are talking about science over here, science is a tool. It is trying to bring up or investigate the principles, prove them, establish certain conclusions and inferences after the principles have been proven. Whether be it any theorem, consider any theorem, be it Bernoulli's theorem or other theorems, Pythagoras' theorem, whatever has been up till now. All these theorems have been established after certain conclusions and inferences have been drawn on the basic principles. But spirituality is something which is not belonging to this world. And you are trying to crack something infinite through a finite subject. Is it possible? Cracking something infinite through a finite subject. That's not possible. The cause is finite, then the effect is finite. But we are going to study something that is infinite, so the effect is also infinite. And we are trying to study an infinite effect through a finite subject. How is that possible? There are sages in India who have experienced certain states in their meditation, which even science cannot comprehend. Just because the scientists do not practice that. It is going to come after the practice is done. We are trying to relate ourselves to infinity, and that is possible only when we train our pran to the next level vibration, the rate of vibration. I can see you, you can see me, because we all are vibrating at the same rate. The day I start to vibrate at a different rate, I won't be visible to you, and you won't be visible to me. So it is like a huge ocean where there are layers. On the deeper side, there are those that are having a different rate of vibration. On the upper side, there are those that slightly vary more. So this is the way there are different bifurcations. And similarly, universe of which we are a part is actually a multiverse. We are not aware of the other universe. We can be aware of it only if we train our pran. And how can a scientist do that? A scientist is busy gauging all those things, busy with the measurements, busy with a particular subset of people, carrying out studies on all of that. But they are trying to study the finite causes. And what is science? Mitch, it is in itself a temperament. It is not something that is a subject. Science is a temperament. If we are following certain path, and after that we feel that we are not able to reach a particular conclusion, I would say that, sorry, I'm not going to take this up. This is not scientific. This is the temperament. This is science. But if you're not practicing something and directly you say that this is invalid, sorry, there's a problem in the temperament itself, isn't it? So science is not merely a subject. And Mitch, I think that we were talking one day, once you were saying that, Shreya, I'm interested in science, though I've not read it so much in depth, isn't it? That is your temperament. So you are scientific by temperament, and science is a subject.
Like
So the
curious.
people who are not scientific, yeah, the people who are not scientific in temperament would say that all this is in vain. Come on, practice it. Practice it for a year. And if you don't get result, then say it. It's not a science.
Okay, do you mind? Okay, I have a way to bring it back to the Prasna Upanishads now, because as what was his name? What's the dude's name? The guru in Prasna Upanishads. His name is
Pipalada.
Pipalada. Pipalada. Which is a really fun,
Yeah.
really fun name to say. You go Pipalada. Pipalada has 6 curious people, maybe even scientists. You know, they're like, we got questions for you, bro, and we got prashnas for you, because that's, I just learned that today, everybody. That prashna means question. So I'm just gonna go, I got a prashna for you, and people in the West will not know what I'm talking about, and it'll be fun. But these 6 disciples go up to him, and they have questions, and he's like, hold your horses. You need to sit with me for a year doing pretty much nothing, like having no fun at all for a year, and then I'll think about answering your questions, but only if your questions are coming from a genuine place, and trust me, I know when they're not. That's basically what he's doing to these guys. And you can go into more detail for sure, please, when after I hand it over to you. But with regards to this whole idea of initiation, which is something that I think it's worth exploring, give it a little bit of time, because you said that, like, the science puts the law first and then tries to prove the law. The call is gonna end in 10 minutes. Oh, because it's a Google Meet thing. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Lucas. The Father Thunder, who's in the background. Thank you, Lucas, for all your help putting all this together. The initiation experience is something that is worth pointing at and looking at for a second, because what is it doing, and why don't people accept it? And if I'll say it quickly, and then I would love for you to go off of it, and then hopefully into the text more if you can. That if Pipalada says, listen, you got to be Mitch, you want to figure it out, well, I have some insight that I can share with you, but you need to spend a year abstaining from sex, drugs. You got to do yoga every day. You know, I don't know exactly what he said that they had to do, but then maybe there were 12 disciples that went to the tree where he was sitting under, and 6 of them were like, what? Like, no, I'm not abstaining from these things. I couldn't go a year without sex, or I couldn't go a year without wine, or I couldn't go a year without whatever. And then he's like, well, fine, you're go. I don't care, right? And there's something to be said about that threshold, because what prevents the individual person from openly accepting these requirements? Because that's the deal. And not everybody, and I'm not saying it's a judgment and that the people who stay are better than the people who leave, because like I've quoted a few times from the Kabbalah, like, keep trying to conquer the physical world until you no longer want to. It's only after you've gotten enough out of this experience that you're going to willingly let it go, because until then it's going to be tempting. It's like, well, until you've had really good food, you're going to want really good food. And I don't think there's anything morally wrong with that. But the people who really want to know, they really have to show it. And so that's what Pipalada does, is he offers them a compromise or a deal, that this is what you have to do for me so that I can give it back to you, through this initiation thing, which is, I think it speaks a lot to where souls, for lack of a better word, are at on their infinite evolution, right? Getting back to the immaterial evolution and not the physical evolution. So yes, I'll hand it over to you there if you want to spin off of that, and then bring us back to the text.
Yeah, you were talking about the disciples. I suppose that the disciples were there and he asked them to stay for an year with him, with penance and abstaining from different things. And that's
Yes.
what, yeah. Okay. Fine.
So in the context of what maybe why did they do that, as well as, do you think there's validity in things like that, like initiation periods, especially in contrast to people who would otherwise not be willing to go through an initiation period like that?
Yeah. So when can we begin? Can we?
I believe so.
Okay, fine. Okay. So, Mitch, I suppose that, and it's not a supposition, I would say. I am very well aware, as the Upanishad talks about in the Shlok 2, the Prasna Upanishad says that Rishi Pipalada, sage Pipalada, asked his disciples, the 6 disciples that he had. I would like to take the names as well. It was Kaushalya, Sukesa, then it was Soryayani, then there was Bhargava, then the other one is Kabandhi, and the last one, which I think was Satyakama, right? So these are the 6 disciples, and these 6 disciples have their spiritual master as Pipalada, which you feel is a very funny name. But
Fun. It's a fun name to say.
So Rishi Pipalada was approached by the disciples because they wanted to know certain questions that were not related to this world, that were related to the infinite, that was related to Brahma and to the Brahman inside all of us. So when they actually approached their sage, their spiritual master, Rishi Pipalada asked them that you have to stay for an year with tapasa, that is penance, and they also were asked to have absolute shraddha, which is faith, that is devotion and dedication. Furthermore, they were asked to follow celibacy, that is brahmacharya, to follow brahmacharya, celibacy. Now, since you're asking that everyone is not ready to take up such intense level of pain, because we actually start to find pleasure in doing all these things, whether it is sex, whether it is drugs, whether it is anything, isn't it? We start to feel that, yes, yeah, that's the truth of every human being's life. We
Yes.
start to feel that this is something which is going to give us the ethereal pleasure. But since they are trying to seek the infinite, they are trying to understand about the intricacies of the infinite power, they have to relate themselves better. And for that, they have to give up those pleasures which are finite in nature.
Mm.
They have to hold themselves consistently into the infinite. And that realization is possible only if one is ready to enjoy the infinite bliss and to give up all the finite bliss in nature. And what are those finite bliss? Obviously, as we know, Mitch, that every infinite, every finite being, whatsoever he or she keeps on enjoying, there is a reaction to that particular thing. For example, if I develop an intense bond with someone, that bond in itself is going to be a source of pain for me later in life, isn't it? Because everything that is actually initiating is going to have an impact upon me. And since we are aware that all these finite things in nature, be it any relationship of this world, be it any branch of knowledge, all of this actually deteriorates slowly. It is going to diminish. It is going to have a curve that is steeply sloping down, isn't it? And since we all know that it's going to slope down, there is just one thing which is going to be consistent in the form of a straight line. And that is what is the consistent witness to everything, that is ourself. Even when we are dreaming, we know that what we dreamt about. There are certain dreams, though, which we are not aware of. But certain dreams we are able to capture. We do remember that what we saw in the dream. So there is a consistent witness. Some constancy is there, and that constancy is the infinite. And to realize that constancy, we ourselves have to be stable. And all these things like sex, drugs, they help us to reach a state of hallucination, artificial blissfulness. That bliss is actually not ethereal or eternal in nature. It is going to vanish as soon as something that has been consumed is finished. But the bliss we are talking about, which Upanishad talks about, is something eternal in nature. And to enjoy something eternal in nature, we need to be at par with the energy level of that. And so we need to give up all those destructive things that provide us artificial bliss, because that is a kind of attachment, isn't it? If I get attached to, or if I get hangover to a certain drug, I would feel like taking it over and over again because I feel that's imparting me a blissful feeling, that's making me feel happy. But if I don't get it for a particular span of time, I would feel helpless. But this bliss is going to provide us a consistent hope, a consistent pleasure in life, a contentment, a satisfaction, which is actually not possible by anything else. So that is why I think that he asked that they should observe a certain lifestyle, because that lifestyle is going to help them realize or get a steadfast dedication towards the Brahman or the soul inside.
So would you say, like, because that you kind of touched on it, but I would like to try one more time, like, why can't we gain enlightenment if that is the goal? We didn't actually stipulate or clarify what exactly this reunion or this merging with the infinite bliss. I mean, when you say, like, would you rather have bliss that ends or would you have bliss that doesn't end? You're probably going to say, well, a bliss that doesn't end, right? That's the whole point, I think. So then, but you can't have that bliss while you're still experiencing the finite bliss. And you have to kind of, like, for example, I have had bouts of drinking alcohol where it's in, like, to be honest, and I'm not judging, but like it takes a hold of me and I feel like I can't stop, and then I need more of it even though it makes me feel worse, and I never feel good after drinking. And I got to the point where, and to be totally honest, that, like, this is a feeling that I was drinking because I felt uncomfortable with the desire of not wanting to drink. It's like that, and that doesn't make any sense. It's like I needed to stop. I have, and subsequently, since I stopped, everything has gotten better, which is proof like that. You know, you're talking about the basically the private felt experience of these gurus who are having, they're saying like there's these states of experience. And then when we were off in the interim there, you mentioned that you've had these experiences, I've had these experiences. I think everybody has had those experiences of like clarity or peace, right? Peace, where it's just calm, right? And that you can't get that when you're drinking. You might be able to flirt with it, but it always ends feeling worse than it started. And that's why they're literally called hangovers, and those suck. And so it's like, well, stop drinking, right? So it's like, why can't we have these finite pleasures and the infinite pleasures? Why can't I get drunk with Pipolata and talk to God, and be infinitely blissful at the same time? Like what is it about, specifically about the finite pleasures that need to be renounced to get to the blissful states?
Okay. Mitch, the answer lies in itself, that whatever we have discussed before, since we know that the cause of pleasure that we are deriving from the finite things of the world, then the effect of that is also going to be finite, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And when we are trying to understand, see, finite beings are multiple in nature, isn't it? Infinity is one. Can there be multiple infinities? No. Infinite is just so huge, it is boundless.
Right.
And finite are limiting adjuncts, as we talked about.
Yeah.
And since those limiting adjuncts get addicted to certain behavioral patterns, be it in the form of drug, be it in the form of sexual behaviors, those limiting adjuncts start nearing death, because now they have created a dependency on some finite cause of pleasure.
But is it the finite cause of pleasure isn't going to work because it's intrinsically finite, and when the thing ends, so like you might start to drink, start to feel good, but then slowly over time it deteriorates and you feel worse than before you started drinking. It's just
That's
one
true.
example. It's not I'm not saying that alcohol is the be all end all, but it's just one example. Is the reason why the finite can't get us to the infinite, is it because the finite ends, which leads to suffering, and suffering is for lack of a better word, what we're trying to avoid?
Exactly. In fact, when someone is having, for example, the situation that you took, someone is an alcoholic and he starts to drink. At the initial stages, he's going to have a lot of pleasure, that amazing experience. I actually lose control over my senses. I can speak whatever I
Yeah.
wish to. But gradually, it's going to impact his body. His nervous system is going to weaken. Then his liver is going to weaken. He might suffer from cirrhosis or something like that. But he will realize for sure a reaction of the behavioral pattern that he has developed, isn't it? That reaction is that misery is going to be there, because he was seeking pleasure from something that was finite in nature. So misery is bound to happen. But when we are seeking pleasure from something that is eternal or infinite in nature, there is no misery. We can have that pleasure over and over again.
So can you then, wouldn't it make sense? Like, what if you got okay with it? Some people say like, yeah, sure, I get hangovers, whatever. I'm cool with it. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. And imagine that they're being genuine to the best of their ability. They're saying, like, I know that this isn't good for me, but I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me psychologically. I still function in the world. Are we like, what do you like? Are they not? Is that not okay? Like, because they're not bothered, right? So where's their suffering then if it's not there? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lucas.
Okay, so just answering this one and then we'll wrap up.
Cool.
So Mitch, what was the question you asked? That since we are like, some people might not be comfortable, isn't it? Giving it
Well,
up.
no. That what if they are comfortable with the suffering? Like for example, like I could say, you know, that in Canada we have Caesars, which are drinks that are literally clam juice and tomato juice and vodka. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and I've never understood how it ever even was invented. How did you put clam juice and tomato juice in the same thing? And then somebody's like, "Oh yeah, let's add vodka to this." They must have been hammered when they were making it or something. But like if you they have this is like a hangover cure drink in Canada. People actively drink it the day after. I know this personally. Actively drink it the day after a night of heavy drinking because it's the hair of the dog that feeds you. But they don't care. They don't care. Like, why can't, if they're okay with the cycle, if the human being or the limited
It's okay with
adjunct
it.
is okay with the suffering, who are we to say that they like? Is that not an example of eternal bliss in a way that's actually physical in nature?
That cannot be an eternal bliss. The reason is, even though a person is okay with the suffering, he has developed an innate tendency to accept the suffering, but the suffering is still there.
Mm.
The acceptance of the suffering won't mean the absence of the suffering. I think that, Mitch, it makes sense, isn't it? The suffering is still there. For example, a person is in a relationship where he or she feels often suffocated. He or she feels that there's no freedom at all, but still he or she is bound to live into that. Then that acceptance of suffering won't mean that she or that person is happy about it, isn't it?
Mm. Mm.
He has actually established a particular threshold of patience or acceptance level, which is not getting violated now. That's it. And that actually is going to, one day or the other, make that person feel saturated. May it be later or sooner. But saturation is bound to occur, Mitch. There is no one who cannot get saturated. Some people later in life, some people earlier in life.
Hmm. That's really.
But that saturation is bound to happen because the mental suffering is going to take a toll on that person, slowly or gradually. He or she might be feeling that, yes, today is the day of enjoyment. But as soon as that drug loses its effect, then that next level consciousness, it goes away.
Hmm.
So all those things are going to creep in. But in case of the bliss that we attain from the infinite, is not going to happen. The absence of injury is there. The absence of pain is there in that.
Hmm.
But there is intense pain in itself in walking on the path of this journey of attaining that infinite bliss, isn't it?
Right. Yes. The pain of renunciation.
Yeah, the pain of renunciation, which is far higher than anything else. But then the bliss you attain is something that empowers you throughout life.
Hmm.
So that is where people have to choose. They have to choose that whether are they going to weigh heavy on their mental level, or are they going to take up a path of renunciation where they feel that, yes, I'll be empowered throughout life.
Hmm.
That
Wow.
is where we need to decide.
Wow. That's a good point to conclude, because like we can definitely pick that up next time and continue discussing that, because that reminds me of something that Carl Jung said, who's a psychoanalyst. He said that the only cure for suffering is a higher form of suffering. Like there's just suffering in the world. You're gonna suffer, and the only cure for that is to do something on higher on the noble spectrum, which is we can unpack all of that. We can definitely note that down and then keep that going for next time. So, but we'll end this episode. Our first episode is done, Shreya. Holy smokes.
Yes. Please.
So we'll do it again at the same time next week, which is 12:30 p.m. hopefully Canada time. And what time is it for you, Shreya, at 12:30 p.m. Canada time?
10 p.m. India.
10 p.m. Indian time. And thank you to Lucas, who helped us stream this. And we're going to download the audio and the video and then put it on different platforms, including a podcast, which will be the same name, which will be called SOS, which I love the name of. So thank you very much, Shreya, for for spending time with me today. Thank you, Lucas, and thank you for anybody who's listening. And if anybody does have any questions or comments, or please reach out to us in the various chat modes so that we can keep this conversation going. Because I think Shreya would agree with me that we're bringing this up because we want to talk about it, not because we know and we're trying to brainwash everybody. We're just curious people who want to have interesting conversations.
True.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll see everybody next week.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Lucas. Bye-bye.